buckle up for this deep dive. We're really diving into some like raw emotion with this one, this
Yeah.
commentary on American politics. You know, the one you sent over?
Oh, yeah, yeah. It's intense.
It's not just some random rant, though, right? Like, people are actually listening to this.
They are. It's really striking a nerve.
So let's unpack it, try to figure out why this message is resonating so strongly,
Okay.
and maybe uncover a few, uncomfortable truths along the way
Yeah, I'm up for that.
about where American political discourse is headed.
Yeah, yeah.
So where do you even start with this one?
Well, what I find fascinating is how this commentator, he doesn't just criticize, he criticizes with a purpose. There's this like real sense of betrayal that just jumps out at you,
Right.
particularly when he talks about the Democratic Party and their relationship with black men.
Yeah, this whole idea of like lecturing black men really
Yeah.
got to me. And especially his reaction to that, recent speech by former President Obama. It's like he feels like this isn't just about disagreeing on policy, It's something much deeper.
Exactly.
It's about respect, representation, maybe even a sense of like feeling taken for granted.
Absolutely. And this isn't some new phenomenon either. The relationship between the black community and the Democratic Party, it's been evolving for decades. You can look back at the Civil Rights era, for example. That's when many black voters shifted away from the Republican Party, the party of Lincoln, and towards the Democrats. But that alliance, the one built on, the promise of progress and equality, it's been tested time and again. And this commentator, he's tapping into this well of disillusionment, this frustration that has been brewing for years.
And the thing is, he doesn't just stop at criticism, right?
Yeah.
He takes it a step further, almost advocating for this, like radical shift.
Yeah.
He's saying black men are so fed up, they might just turn their backs on the Democrats altogether. He even suggests, that they might be better off not voting at all. Now, I don't know if I agree with that, but the fact that he's even saying it out loud, it tells you something about the level of frustration here.
Absolutely.
Right.
And that's what makes this commentary so powerful. It's this potent mix of anger, disillusionment, but also there's a strategic calculation in there too.
Yeah.
Like, is withholding your vote, like he suggests, a power play?
Right.
Could it actually lead to more leverage for black men within the political landscape?
Yeah.
It's a question that's been debated for generations.
Yeah.
And it speaks to these complex dynamics of power, representation, and political strategy, all within the black community. And it's not even just about like walking away. It's about, what are the other options?
Right.
He even hints at this possibility of black men, aligning themselves with the Republican Party.
Yeah.
Which, a generation ago would have been unthinkable.
Yeah, and he almost like dares you to just dismiss it, like, oh, that's crazy talk.
Yeah.
But then he hits you with these like very specific grievances,
Yeah.
like the economy, for example. He talks about inflation, the cost of living, jobs, issues that frankly hit a lot of people regardless of race. But he frames them as like particularly pressing for black communities.
Right. And it's interesting how he weaves those economic anxieties, those very real anxieties, with this broader sense of, cultural alienation.
Yeah.
Like, he's tapping into this feeling, right, that the Democratic Party has just become too focused on, like, symbolic gestures of equality, and, like, they're ignoring the everyday struggles of working-class Americans.
And he's not just, ranting about it. Like, he's pointing to, what he sees as tangible shifts in the political landscape. How some black men are, like, finding themselves more aligned with maybe conservative values around, like, family or religion or even, like, entrepreneurship. Things that don't always, like, fit neatly into those traditional, like, liberal or conservative boxes.
Totally. And this is where this whole discussion of identity politics gets really, really interesting. Because it's not just about, checking boxes based on your race or your gender or whatever.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing, the fluidity of individual beliefs and how those beliefs intersect with these broader political movements.
Yeah.
And you can't underestimate the power of a message that resonates on a personal level,
Exactly.
even if it's coming from, a source that you might not expect.
Okay, so something else that really struck me was how much time he spends railing against the media,
Oh, yeah.
almost accusing them of being like completely out of touch with the concerns of everyday Americans.
Yeah.
And, especially with the concerns of, these black men who are feeling disillusioned with the Democratic Party.
Absolutely. And this is where his commentary, like, really aligns with this, I think, broader trend of distrust in institutions, and particularly distrust in the media.
Yeah.
I mean, we've seen this play out across the political spectrum, right?
Yeah. Right.
With, both the left and the right.
Of course. Yeah.
Accusing the media of bias, of manipulation, of, having an agenda. But in this case, he's laser focused on what he sees as this disconnect between, the issues that dominate media coverage,
right,
and the issues that people actually care about in their daily lives.
Yeah. Like he uses that phrase, most Americans, a lot.
Right.
It's almost like he's trying to create this separation
Totally.
between everyday people and this elite class of, politicians and journalists who he claims are stuck in their own bubble.
Totally.
And he even brings up those, low viewership numbers.
Yeah.
For, cable news, for example, especially compared to his own audience. He's using that as evidence that people are tuning out the mainstream media's narrative.
Yeah, that's a tactic we see a lot, I think, in these kinds of commentaries. It's about, by positioning himself as this kind of voice of the people.
Right.
He's implicitly, questioning the legitimacy of traditional media outlets.
Yeah.
He's saying, they're not just biased, they're irrelevant.
Right.
They're out of touch with the real concerns of real people.
Yeah.
And for a certain segment of the population, that message, it lands.
And it's not even just general distrust of the media. He gets super specific.
Oh, yeah.
Almost fixated on the 2020 election. He's convinced the media is still so hung up on it.
Right.
And it's to him, that's proof that they're not focused on, what really matters to people today.
Totally. He sees it as this obsession.
Yeah, exactly.
That distracts from the actual issues. And he uses that example, remember, the J.D. Vance interview in the New York Times.
Yeah.
Where they're implying that if you deport undocumented immigrants, it's going to be bad for the construction industry.
Right. Because so many construction workers are, Hispanic.
Exactly. And he sees that whole line of questioning as just being rooted in bias.
Yeah.
Not a genuine attempt to understand the issue.
Yeah, it plays into that whole narrative he's constructing, right?
Totally.
About the media having an agenda. It's he's saying, you guys are still hung up on this while people are out here struggling to afford gas and groceries.
Right, exactly. Get your priorities straight.
Yeah, he's appealing to this sense of urgency. He's feeling that the media is just completely out of touch with, the everyday realities.
And it really highlights, I think, this real challenge for journalists.
Yeah.
How do you cover these complex issues, especially things like elections, potential fraud, without, amplifying misinformation or giving a platform to these potentially harmful viewpoints?
Right.
It's a tough line to walk.
Yeah, and he almost seems to be calling for a complete reset, a rejection of the, traditional gatekeepers of information. It's he's saying, we don't need you to tell us what's important anymore.
And figure it out on our own.
Exactly.
And that's such a crucial point because it's bigger than just him.
Right.
It reflects this massive shift, how people consume information now.
Yeah.
It's information overload, right?
And totally.
Anyone can publish anything. It's so easy to get stuck in these echo chambers.
Right.
Where you only hear what you already agree with. So where does that leave us? That's the question.
Yeah, it's a big one.
If people are this distrustful of these big institutions, right? The media, the government, who are they going to turn to? What do they trust?
Yeah, it's in this void, then what happens?
Exactly. And look, I don't have a simple answer. Nobody does. But what's clear is this guy, this commentator, he's tapped into something real.
Oh, absolutely.
This raw discontent.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's messy, it's emotional, but it's resonating with people.
Yeah, it definitely is.
So even if you don't agree with everything he's saying, you can't just dismiss it.
No, not at all. It's a symptom of something much bigger.
Exactly.
Well, on that note, this deep dive has given us, a lot to chew on.
For sure.
We've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
And, this commentary, it forces us to confront some maybe uncomfortable truths.
Absolutely.
About where we are right now.
Yeah.
How divided we are, this lack of trust that we see everywhere.
Yeah.
And it really begs the question, can we bridge those divides? Can we find common ground? Or are we just going to keep retreating further into our own corners?
It's a question worth asking ourselves.
It really is. And on that note, that's it for this deep dive. Thanks for listening, everybody.